Welcome aboard the Pilot Money Guys podcast, where our mission is to help professional pilots build and protect wealth on their journey to financial freedom. This podcast is brought to you by Leading Edge Financial Planning.
Welcome to the Pilot Money Guys, Charlie Mattingly and Kevin, the Professor Gormley.
The Godfather.
However, Kevin, I turned 50.
Yes.
And so someone said, now you're not the Godfather, you're the grandfather. And so
yeah, well, you know, there's a lot of white in my box here with my hair. You're getting salt and pepper though, Charlie.
I know.
You're not quite all gray. You're salt and pepper. That's a good look.
I actually am a grandfather. I'm the only one in our business. Only one. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
My
such a young fella.
Emma has a little girl, and she's the cutest thing ever. And I can see why people love grandbabies.
Yeah. Well, congratulations again, Charlie. I think I've congratulated you before, but right. Yeah, the grandfather. We'll call you the grandfather.
That's right. Now. One other wrinkle to our otherwise crazy, non-traditional family. But Kevin, it's good to be here today. And we are going to talk about becoming a multi-millionaire pilot next door.
One of the books that really was, I think, revolutionary was the Millionaire Next Door. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm extremely excited to talk about this topic.
I think that was up until recently the most impactful book I read as a young. I remember reading it in the Air Force, and it's a simple concept of living within your means, below your means, whatever. But man, that book really opened my eyes to a lot of things, and just changed the way that I thought about things. So anyway, we'll talk about that today. I'm excited. Before we get into that, though, before we get into the meat of the mission on how to become a multi-millionaire pilot next door, we're going to talk about a couple things. We've got airline news. You're going to take that in a second. We've got a couple things from the flight deck, questions from the flight deck. We've been getting a lot, and I think they're really, really important. And so hang on for that. But first, Kevin, airline news. Pilots are making more money than they ever have before. Take it away.
Charlie, this group called Sling Aviation Academy came out with a video on YouTube, and an article was written about the fact that, you know, a lot of parents, they want their kids to be what? They want their kids to be a doctor,
lawyers,
a lawyer, an engineer. But they actually had some spreadsheets that show that today pilots actually make about the same money over their lifetime as will those other professions. Mm-hmm. They even make some funny quotes in the video, the article, about the fact that, you know, you used to not tell anyone if you were a professional pilot because you'd make about the same as a fast food restaurant worker. But you know, things have changed a lot, Charlie. Really, if you want to know what they say that a pilot can make about $13 million over their lifetime. More importantly, though, for them, they want to train future pilots, and you know, you can train for a couple of years and then start to make some money. Whereas doctors, how many years do doctors have to go to school? How many years do lawyers have to go to school? How many years do engineers have to go to school? So they're also saying that you can get into the profession a lot quicker and start making money. So anyway, you know, I think this is super interesting. The context that I think is extremely important is, will pilots continue to make that kind of money in the next 30 years? Yeah. I think so, but what are your thoughts on that, Charlie? Could anything, the single pilot in the cockpit or anything else, really stop someone from going into aviation right now because they want to have a good living?
Man, that's a great question, and it's so many variables. I think as you were talking, I was thinking about how volatile the airline industry is, how much change it has gone through, but man, if I was a young person now, I think you got a bright future. I think there are risks, you know, and the airlines always seem to be the first affected by any kind of world event, whether that be a war or a pandemic or a energy problem, whatever. But so be ready for that, you know, and that's what you and I love to try to add value in. You know, just control your personal balance sheet, because your professional life is crazy. The airline business is difficult, but it's you can make a lot of money. So hopefully I added a little bit of context there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, that's the thing with any investment we make, be it a career or anything else, 5 years from now, will artificial intelligence be treating patients? Who the heck knows?
That's right. Yeah, it's a crazy world for everyone. I'd say doctors included. So yeah, it's a great career though. And I would encourage young people to look into that seriously.
Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes if people want to watch the video or critique the article
That's right.
or video.
That's right. Add some, when you're showing your kids the video, add some personal experience in there as well to make sure they are fully aware. But so the couple questions we've got lately, and more than just questions, really, some scenarios we've come across are how, I'll just throw it out there, Kevin, life insurance savings for college. Like it's not really a concept or strategy that's ever crossed my mind, quite frankly, but we're seeing it out there to our surprise and sometimes shock. So we're going to go through that as objectively as possible. Some of you are already like, it's a no-brainer. I'm going to do a 529, but maybe it's not such a no-brainer, and we'll go through again as objectively as possible. But I'll also give an opinion as well, Kevin.
Yeah. I mean, Charlie, as fiduciary fee only financial planners, we don't sell insurance. We can get people insurance. Many times we do manage 529, so we could have a potential we do have a conflict of interest there, and we're not going to get paid off those life insurance contracts. But it's come up so many times recently that's the reason why we feel like we have to address it. And I finally realized, Charlie, what's happened here is I think a number of insurance people have thought this is another avenue for us to sell insurance. There's actually stuff on the internet now about, hey, if you're a life insurance person, maybe get into college planning. That's a place where maybe you can sell some life insurance policies. So, but that's not to say that it might not be good in some cases. We've not seen any cases yet that we think it would really be the first choice we would make, though, Charlie.
Well, that was very diplomatic, Kevin. Good job. You passed the compliance test. And, on a podcast, like you said, we've got to be compliant and fiduciaries, but I'll tell you, this is not advice to anyone. Clearly, we can't give advice, but I would never do insurance for myself and my family. It doesn't make sense for us. Maybe, like you said, there's a rare situation where it might. But the problem, Kevin, that we come across is that when people are giving this advice or proposing this strategy, they make a ton of money on selling this product. So it is a massive conflict of interest. And if you're considering this, then you need to know, the motivations of the person that you're talking to. Just kind of like you talked about, we have motivations as well. So let's get in, now that we've done all the disclosure, Kevin, let's get into the nuts and bolts of this thing. 529s, extremely flexible. They've got even more flexible lately. We're going to cover those in a second, but I'm going to talk about the life insurance component. So here's the sales pitch, and it goes like this. Life insurance can be used to fund your child's college because there's a cash value component, meaning as little savings, envision a bucket of savings inside this life insurance policy. And then you can borrow that little bucket of savings, borrow from that, and pay for your kid's college. And essentially, you don't pay taxes to borrow, you pay interest to the life insurance company, which is less than taxes. So far, so good, Kevin, right? We got everything?
Yeah, well, there's one more caveat there, Charlie. You can also grow your money inside the insurance policy.
There you go.
So you're not actually taking your money and as one insurance person claimed, burning it by throwing it towards the college. You can continue to get interest on your money in the insurance wrapper. Yeah. And then borrow against it. And then when you die, the loan could be paid back. Boy, it sounds so simple. And it sounds so good.
That's right. It does sound great, but it's not great, because here's what happens. You pull the money out. If you borrow, you're going to pay interest to the insurance company, and the interest rates depend. Right now, they're higher. Obviously, interest rates are higher. I don't know what it would be, probably 5, 6, 7% at least, I would assume, maybe higher. And if you don't pay that money back, then you will pay ordinary income tax on that, or your death benefit will be reduced by the exact amount. Yeah. So those are a couple of things to keep in mind there. But Kevin, jump in if there's any other nuts and bolts.
So Charlie, I think what's really important to me about this, trying to be intellectual, is that this whole thing can work.
Mm-hmm.
If actually what happens in the future is just like they model it,
Mm-hmm.
it actually works pretty well. I contacted Michael Kitces, Nerd's Eye View, when I really went down this rabbit hole around life insurance for a saving vehicle. And he wrote me like 3 pages. If you know Michael Kitces, he can write, and he writes beautifully. And after 3 pages of telling me all the things that could go wrong, he put a sentence, something to the effect of, "Yeah, but it could work. It could work exactly how they say." So that's really the issue. This thing can work, and I think insurance people they do see that it's going to work, and that's their passion for sharing it with clients, I think.
Yeah. So I looked up, Kevin, tried to find the most objective source, and it's, I went to Investopedia, right? They're objective. So they've got the pros and cons. And so here are some of the pros for using life insurance. One is flexibility. Suppose your child decides against going to college. Any earnings in your 529 account, not your contributions though, will be subject to ordinary income tax rates and usually a 10% penalty if you decide to withdraw them. That is true. However, there was a recent change where you can actually roll some of that money under certain conditions into a Roth for your child, or you can transfer it to another child if they don't use it. There's been a lot of flexibility added in 529s. So I'll caveat that as well.
Yeah. So if you have the bad problem of having put a ton of money in a 529 and it grew a ton,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean that actually sounds pretty good, Charlie.
Yeah,
and then you have to pull all the money out all at once. Yeah, you'll have to pay taxes and a 10% penalty, but there's so many escape hatches now that's not that big of a deal anymore. Number one, and number two, if you don't have to take the money out when you're in your highest earning years, Charlie. Instead of being in your 32% earning years, you could be in your 10% earning years, and yeah, you pay 22%. So again, they try to scare you.
Yeah. The other pro that Investopedia put on there was the life insurance is not included in the financial aid calculations. By contrast, money in a 529 is considered a parental asset. Up to 5.64% are counted in the applicant's expected family contribution for each college. Now, that is true. However, our clients, the vast majority, will not get financial aid. And so I don't know that that's a valid point that you can make, especially if you're a high income earning airline family. It's just not going to help you any.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I got nothing to add, Charlie.
All right. Now here's the cons. Again, one of the ones is the insurance are very expensive. There's internal fees. There's mortality expense fees, and because it's meant to provide insurance against death. Okay, that's what it's meant to do, and those fees are valid if you're insuring against that risk. So it could take 10 years or more for your cash value to surpass what you have paid in premiums. Okay, that's what Investopedia says because of those internal expenses. So, it's like, man, I don't know. That takes a long time to overcome just what I put in there. And so that's something to think about. Those heavy expenses could be upwards of 2% per year in administrative and investment costs, Kevin. So way, way higher than any kind of 529 out there.
Yeah. So the other sales pitch is that what if your kids can get insurance when they're really young, they're very insurable. Maybe when they get older, they can't get insurance. Again, that's kind of a straw man type issue. Do they need insurance when they get older?
Exactly.
Do they have an insurable interest? Will they work for a company that has term life, et cetera, et cetera? So, but yeah, Charlie, you're exactly right. That is a con, or Investopedia is exactly right.
Exactly. Yeah. So bottom line, Investopedia says, even though you may have to forfeit a small chunk of your account because of financial aid rules, you're likely to come out ahead, even still, by using a 529 because of its lower expenses. So, just think about, I think if you're getting this proposal, think about who's getting paid, how they're getting paid. That has a huge influence on the sales pitch. And one of the ways to simplify this is think about life insurance for life insurance. You're insuring against a death. Let's just keep it simple, right? Kind of one of our.
Yeah, I got one more thing, Charlie, and hopefully this is not going to become its own podcast because we're talking so much about this. But you actually could have a brokerage account.
Yeah.
and throw a ton of money in there and then borrow against it.
Yeah.
You can do that too. You could borrow against your house. You
Yeah.
could borrow against a life insurance policy.
Yeah.
None of those are taxable borrowing.
Yeah.
So,
That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And so we're gonna transition a little bit away from that. Clearly, I tried to be objective, Kevin. I probably wasn't that objective, but we're not giving
No, you
advice.
weren't.
And and make sure you seek out your professional, tax professional, financial professional before you make that decision. So, Kevin, that was a lot from the flight deck. So, but hopefully it was useful. Let's transition to how to become the multi-millionaire pilot next door. This was one of my favorite books early on. I thought it was a game changer because it just helped me, Kevin, with a mindset of how to build wealth and what it was really about. And I think that's so important. Before I hand it off to you, I'll tell you this. The Navy SEALs say, hey, planning is important. You know, you've heard the sayings, fail to plan, you're going to fail, etc. But the Navy SEALs say when the plan goes to hell in a handbasket, we fall back onto a mindset that keeps us safe and helps us to execute our mission. And I think that's what we're talking about here is this multi-millionaire mindset, Kevin. So let's jump in.
Yeah. Thank you, Charlie. So, the book was published, I think, in 1995 or thereabout. And now we look back at the book and everybody says, well, all that stuff is so obvious. But at the time, I was in my 20s and, I thought, what did you think a millionaire was? A millionaire was somebody who drove nice cars, had a big house, very good looking children that went to private school. I mean, so when I read the book and I found out that maybe that's not what millionaires were, I was pretty shocked. So anyway, I think it was revolutionary for many of us. I think some people got into financial planning maybe because of that book. But I'll just go over some of the ideas that were presented in the book while you look up the author's name, Charlie. It's Thomas Stanley. I'm sorry,
there you go.
And William Danko. But what they did is they were PhDs. I believe they both were PhDs, but I know Stanley was. And he just started looking at. He was really fascinated with millionaires. How do people become millionaires? And some of the data that they collected, it's been critiqued over the years, but the bottom line is fantastic. And the bottom line is that millionaires are high savers as a percentage of their earnings. He used something, his own calculation, age timed times the realized income divided by 10. Nobody cares. But anyway, if you had double of that amount that he had in his calculation, you were considered a PAW. And if you had half of it, you were considered a UA. So it's PAW and UAW. And he made his own phraseology. And I have trouble saying this. Prodigious accumulator of wealth. You're either a prodigious accumulator of wealth. You're a big saver. I'll just say you're a big saver from now on, or you're an under accumulator of wealth. So the paw is good. The awe is bad. Really what it comes down to though, Charlie, is that if you're saving a lot of your salary, and again, we know that you're probably going to be a millionaire, very successful. What are your thoughts on the first two?
Well, I think that formula is interesting, and I know that you don't want to bore people with numbers. And by the way, you did the inflation math, and you said in 1995 it was the Millionaire Next Door, but today that would be double. Basically, you need $2 million bucks to be.
About 2.2, Charlie. Sorry to interrupt you.
There you go. Yeah, 2.2, and so obviously, millionaire is not what it used to be, but 2.2 millionaires, basically what we're talking about. But I love this idea of wealth, and I'll compare it and contrast it to this idea of rich. And, those are subjective, all kinds of different definitions. But I love the idea of wealth because, in fact, the book that we're reading right now as a firm, The Psychology of Money, he talks about it in his book and says, wealth is invisible. You may not see, and this is the Millionaire Next Door, you may not see someone and go, hey, they're wealthy. And that's the whole point, Kevin, is like, they may not drive the fanciest car. They may not be throwing money around at the bar, buying everybody drinks. But that's where real wealth to me comes in, is it's invisible and it's not a thing. And oftentimes I think, quite frankly, our egos get involved, our pride gets involved a little bit. And so we need to kind of be the person with the nicest car, the kid going to the nicest school in the nicest neighborhood with the nicest pool. And that's actually a destroyer of wealth sometimes. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. And
Mhm.
I get a little confused. What was the Millionaire Next Door versus the Millionaire Mindset? There was a few
Mhm.
other books I read that had the word millionaire in them too. So, but millionaires, in the book, what he found is that most of the millionaires were living in middle class neighborhoods, Charlie.
Mhm.
They were not living in the white collar neighborhoods. They were not driving fancy
Mhm.
cars. They were living a frugal lifestyle. They valued millionaires valued financial independence over
Mhm.
luxury or social status. Just what you just
Yeah.
said. You know,
Mhm.
their children might not have been going to the best school. They might not have been wearing the newest clothes.
Mhm.
Old cars in middle class neighborhoods was really what Stanley found. And the other thing that he found that I think is extremely interesting is that a lot of these people were not what you would think they would be: doctors, engineers,
Mhm.
lawyers. Just what we talked about in the beginning of this podcast. A lot of these people were not professionals.
Mhm.
Now, what he also found is that more doctors were yaws. They were not saving enough, and he said, "Look, if you're a doctor, and you're a really good doctor, and you're driving a crappy car, living in a crappy neighborhood, who's going to think you're a good doctor, Charlie? Would
Mhm.
you go to a doctor that was driving a beater? I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
That's an issue. So certain professions, you really do have a lot of pressure to wear a nice suit and to drive a nice car.
Well, you and I have come across that where locally we go to an event or a client event. We don't have a whole lot of clients here locally, so that maybe is an advantage. You and I can drive whatever the heck we want. But I had an old truck and you had an old a gold Camry. And so sometimes we worried a little bit that people might,
Yes,
and there were people that say, if my advisor doesn't drive a Mercedes, I'm not working with them. And you and
that's right.
I do not drive Mercedes, which is nothing wrong with Mercedes, but anyway,
No?
you get the idea. It's just that's the way some people operate, I think.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, a
Mhm.
lot of success in our world, unfortunately, is very superficial. I mean,
Yeah,
you think someone's successful because they look it.
yeah,
And so that really, just to nail down what the Millionaire Next Door was about, it was about that people that you think millionaires sometimes are not, and people that actually live frugally, live below their
yeah.
means, actually do much better in life. And again, that seems ridiculous now to be discussing that, but
Yeah.
that's how the book was revolutionary to me.
Kevin, and I just want to clarify too, like
Yeah.
we love nice cars. We love nice cars. We
Yes.
love nice stuff. We love boats. Full confession, we're getting ready to put in a pool. All right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's,
And I am driving a used Lexus, but it's a Lexus, Charlie. So
so
yeah, I mean, we do love that stuff
yeah.
too.
So here's the deal though. I think this is all about the math. For example, I remember 10, 15 years ago talking to someone and we hung out with people in this boat club here in Knoxville locally. And people in this boat club had boats no less than $300,000 and $400,000 a piece. But this person was very young in their career and they're like, I'm going to buy this boat. And I was thinking, yeah, that's cool. And all of your friends have these boats. But if you just did the math and did their income ratio to the boat, it was very low, a very low cost for them. Whereas this person, it was the majority of their income. I don't know what ratio you want to use there, annual income divided by the cost of the boat or whatever. But the point is, there's a time and a place for those nice things. And I'll say, let the math be your guide because if you're a brand new FO, you've got this $13 million career income potential that you just talked about, but just hang tight for a little while. Delayed gratification, get your savings, get your spending plan under a good foundation, then you can enjoy those things when the time is right. Again, do the math and don't jump the gun, because once you get behind that, it's really hard to become the PAW, the prodigious accumulator of wealth. So
Yeah, you can be a PAW and be spending like mad when you're in your late 50s
yeah,
because you saved so much early on.
yeah.
So I think that is the key, is to take care of business first, and then you can take care of the pleasure.
Yeah, and I'll reference Flight 81, with our own Lisa Rosenthal, budgeting cash flow expert, which those words turn people off. Let me explain. But it's basically how to align, your spending. There's nothing wrong with spending, but just making sure that it's aligned with your values, what's important to you, and then I think that will, be your guide as well.
So, Charlie, last thing I have with Millionaire Next Door. If you love the book and I left anything out or said something incorrectly, I do apologize. I know there's a cult following of the book. If you've not read the book, please read it. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's still, even I don't know how many years later we are, 29 years later. It's still worthwhile. But Charlie, our pilots, I would say they're different. I would say today's society is different. A lot is different. So, what unique traits, Charlie, do you think pilots have that might set them up either for success or failure? I made a list, but what do you think? You've been both a military pilot as well as a first officer, and you've dealt with some of these issues.
Yeah, I think a couple of good things about our airline families, and this includes the military, background people as well, but Kevin, like you talked about, you shared in the airline news, the majority of the airline pilots now are used to or have been at one point broke. When they started, they were not making as much as the person down at Chick-fil-A makes right now, especially. And so they've been there before. Our military families, they've been there before. They've been where they lived off of very little. So I think that is a valuable experience. And so when a military or a family that's in the airlines tells us, Kevin, a airline family that started off in the regionals 15, 20 years ago, when they tell us, hey, if we have to cut back, we can, I believe them because they've been there. Now, I do think the other part of this difficulty is, I'd say the vast majority, 99% of our millionaires that we know and work with are first generation. And so it's newish money and these new contracts and new money, especially for our younger pilots, is an adjustment. And so I think about the late 20-something pilot, mid 20-something, early 20-something pilots that are out there making 150, 200,000. That's a big responsibility. And so I think that's a challenge, because if you're 28 and you make 200,000 and you're spending every bit of it, you might as well make 50,000. It doesn't, kind of doesn't matter if you're spending every bit of it, right? Does that make sense?
Well, that's a little bit of blasphemy, Charlie, but yeah, I mean, you're probably having more fun and eating better and all that kind of stuff.
That's what I meant.
But your point is valid, and it's sort of like the person who goes to the casino the first time and wins big. Then you think, hey, it's always going to be this way. So if you're at 26 and you're making $150,000, then when you're 36, you're spending all that you're making. When you're 46, you're spending all that you're making. You've never had to live, curtailed in any way that can set you up for failure in the future, Charlie, for sure.
I think it's harder too for our airline, for high income people in general, and that's our airline families. They're high income, but no doubt by the IRS definition. And there's more responsibility to save the right amount. And here's the trap that some of our airline families get into, is that there are IRS limits on how much you can save in your 401k and profit sharing accounts. And when you hit those limits, it's kind of an achievement. But if you're making $400,000 and $500,000 a year, it may not be enough. And so that's the paradox, maybe, is like, because you make so much money, such a great income, you have to really be diligent about saving the right amount of money. And it's probably more than those IRS minimums if you're a little bit late to the game, and most airline pilots are, because of the early struggles. So it's a little bit of a paradox there, where if you're a teacher and a firefighter and that's your family, you got nothing to worry about, Kevin. There's no challenge, if you will, of saving for retirement. It's done for you. So I think that's unique as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Charlie, I think, to me, I'm not a pilot. I couldn't fly anything, but maybe a paper airplane. But so what I've seen, talking to a lot of pilots, talking to you, talking to the other people, is that pilots have sacrificed a lot. Military pilots have sacrificed a lot, being away from family for long periods of time. Pilots themselves, they go on a trip, as you used to tell me, that Sometimes people think when you go on a trip, hey, you're traveling. Hey, this is but no, it's mostly alone. Maybe with one other person, the captain or the first officer. Hopefully you like them. Sometimes you don't. But you're sacrificing a lot, and your spouse and your kids are sacrificing a lot. So there is this ideal with a lot of pilots that I've talked to that we have sacrificed a lot, and so so we deserve something good. And again, if that something good becomes too many something goods, it can be a problem. But can you talk about the sacrificing that you see, that dynamic with pilots?
Yeah, it's tough, and I think pilots make a lot of money, and the part of the reason they make so much, not other than just having a lot of responsibility, literally responsible for lives on their airplane, but is the fact that they're gone so much. And that's hard on families. In other words, if pilots were not gone, more people would want to do it. Supply and demand, that would drive the price down, just economically speaking. But since it is so much time away, it is hard on the families. It is difficult for people. The families left home, while someone's away. And in fact, I'll use Lisa Rosenthal's example again. They were a 25-year Marine family. Her husband Shane deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan multiple times. And so she was a year by herself with kids, but she said the airline rhythm and routine is just as challenging because you're gone, you're home, you're gone, you're home, you're gone. It's just a different rhythm and challenge. But I think to your point, sometimes just like doctors, that struggle, that difficulty, you just want to sometimes go, we deserve X. A doctor has a problem because they've been in school for so long, Kevin, and they get out and they're like, we deserve a Mercedes or whatever. And unfortunately, it's just not true sometimes. Luckily, we don't get everything we deserve. It may not be so good, but it's the math that really should drive those decisions, I think. Is that kind of what you're thinking about, Kevin?
Well, yeah, I think if you each deserve a Mercedes, if you deserve a 10,000 square foot home, you deserve private school, you deserve a country club, that's where it starts to become a problem, Charlie. And that's where I think our recommendation for our airline families is not to live like the millionaire next door and to wear cheap suits and drive beaters and only live in the middle class neighborhoods, and everybody thinks they're middle class, by the way, Charlie. I've not met many people that say, oh, I'm upper class, but if you're making a good living, I don't think you have to sacrifice everything when it comes to saving for the future and becoming a PA. I think with our pilot families, I think it's more about just making sure you're doing some of the right things consistently. And if you do those right things consistently, Charlie, from what we've seen with pilots we've worked with, you can become the multimillionaire pilot. Charlie, what about the dynamic of flying with somebody for a number of days who's really confident about the stuff to buy, how to live, how to invest? Because that to me seems like that's a dynamic that is pretty unique for pilots. If you get somebody who's really gregarious and enthusiastic, sometimes that can, oh, you don't do that?
Yeah.
What?
Oh yeah, dude, you're right, man. I totally forgot about that because I remember flying as a young, brand new FO, and man, after flying for 3 days with someone or 4 days, you share a lot of information. Sometimes you share pay stub information. Now, granted, the FO is not sharing their pay stub; it's the other person, and it's intimidating. It's like, oh my goodness. And what used to really get me, Kevin, too, was when you're on the crew van and somebody are talking about this elaborate vacation, and I was always like, oh my goodness, maybe I'll be able to do that one day. But it was very real and kind of nothing wrong with great vacations. But when you're trying to establish that foundation, there's a little bit of pressure there. That's for sure.
Yeah. So you pull out your wallet in the old days and you would say, yeah, let me show you some pictures. And the person goes, oh, pictures of your kids? No, this is a picture of my boat. This is a picture of my my new car.
My airplane.
Yeah. here's a picture of my airplane. So there is some of that going on, I think, in the cockpit, right, Charlie?
Oh yeah, and again, nothing wrong with those things. It's just it is a dynamic that creates a little bit of challenge if you're younger and trying to establish that foundation. But I think to the point that we're making, those things are great. Vacations are great. Cars are great. Airplanes wonderful. We did a podcast on one, right? Probably podcast 80 if I remember correctly. But it's the order in which you do those things. It's all about that delayed gratification. Get your foundation established, get the savings established. You're going to talk about that stuff, and then you can do all those things when it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, Charlie. So let's go through some of the action items that we see multimillionaire pilots take. The first is the 401k, maxing it out. So Charlie, we got pilots that are 26. I don't know what our youngest FO is now that we work with. It might be younger than 26, but I know we at least have a couple of 26-year-olds. Might be a 60-year-old captain who's already maxing out their 401k without even doing anything. But what are your thoughts about how fast to get to the maximum of a 401k? What have you seen?
Yeah, that's a tough one because it's so high. You know what I mean? And as a young FO, again, if you're flying a lot, you probably could get there pretty quickly. But yeah, that's a lot of money as a new pilot to get there. But I like the idea that you're going to share. I think is just kind of increasing as you go. But it is so important, especially to the young ones. As you get older, it's almost a no-brainer. And like we said before, it's not enough, maybe, you know?
That's right. Yeah. So what I've learned working with pilots is everybody knows their date of hire because they're getting higher pay the next year. That's the time we think you should try to increase your 401k. When you know that date is coming up, change your contribution rate. So if you can start out with 5%, we'd love it to be higher when you're a new hire. Second year, try to increase it by 5%. Third year, do the same. And then we say fourth year, increase again by 5%, but now you might be getting into the bonus zone here already. But anything to add there, Charlie?
You know, the 401k, the Schwab 401ks, and I know United, Spirit, Southwest, they'll do that automatically. I think Fidelity, which is the other airlines,
Yes.
you know, Delta, American, whatnot, they'll automatically let you set that up, and that's really cool and makes it automatic.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Charlie. Yes, the guy won the Nobel Prize for having the 401k increase automatically, which is kind of comical. But yeah, that is something you could set up right away. Okay, so the next one is the cash balance pension. Now, this one's not really fair because no one's had it before. It's brand new, but we're just kind of making this an extension, I think, Charlie, of the 401k. And most of the companies are putting money in the cash balance pension already. But we're saying, you know, consider maximizing that benefit as well, because when the money goes in, you can't spend it. What do you think, Charlie?
Yeah, and each airline, United, Southwest, Delta, the cash balance plans, American, they're a little different, you know, a little bit of different moving parts. And I remember you're going to have some say as the pilot. Now, granted, everybody's going to get a basic portion of the cash balance plan, I think, at all those airlines, but you have some control on how much goes in there by the what's called spillover. And I think, again, that applies to Delta, United, and Southwest to a certain extent. So you're right. I fund it. And it's just going to save you in taxes. People are desperate for tax shelters and, you know, all those things as the income goes up. This is a great one. And it's going to be more conservative, but that's okay. Offset it with, you know, being more aggressive in other areas of your portfolio. And so I think it's just a tremendous benefit. So I'm glad that's come around.
Yeah, and a bonus idea here, Charlie. I think it was yours. If it's not, you can still take credit for it. Is you know, maybe put money into the Roth 401k and then allow extra money to go into the cash balance pension if that's how you want to do it. And that way, you're just getting more money in these types of accounts, and that money in the Roth will never be taxed again in the 401k. So I think that's a good idea. I would say the majority of our captains, I don't know the numbers. I'll say 90%, 95% do the backdoor Roth each year for them and or their spouse. Anything to say about the backdoor Roth and the potential of just putting that little bit in each year, Charlie?
Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. We don't know how much longer that'll be around. I sound like a salesperson when I say that, but it's true because limited time only. But it's usually on the chopping block of these budgets that come out from Congress. But it's stayed around. It's made it through the gauntlets. And I would encourage everyone, if at all possible, to take advantage of that. It's not an easy thing to think about. There's a couple rules you need to understand and the tax consequences. But yeah, it's a great tactic for diversifying your income and for the, future, efficient taxable income in retirement.
Yeah, $8,000 per person, depending on your age. If you have a spouse, you can double that. If you take a reasonable rate of return, this becomes hundreds of thousands of dollars at retirement, tax free. Okay, so the next one is the brokerage account, and again, we always have to bring Warren Buffett up in a video or a podcast. Buffett, all his money is in a taxable account, Charlie. I mean, he owns a bunch of Berkshire stock. It's not in a 401k IRA. Why is the brokerage account so good, especially for owning equities?
Yeah, that's you're an expert in the tax benefits of that, but I'll tell you this: you can invest in a brokerage account. I mean, first of all, let me back up. I love it for its flexibility. It's just a tremendous account that brings people great comfort knowing that they can get to it if they need to. We love it for its retirement benefits, but you can get to this without penalty. You're going to pay capital gains taxes, which are usually lower than income taxes, but it's so flexible. You can put as much as you want in there. It just provides great tax diversification in retirement. And if you invest appropriately using index funds, low cost ETFs, you can really create a lot of not quite perfect tax deferral, but with tax loss harvesting benefits and low turnover within those index funds, mutual funds, then you can really create some great tax deferred ish growth. Did I say all that right, Kevin?
Yeah, you got it. And not to mention that you could always borrow against that money,
Oh, there we go.
just
Yep.
like an insurance policy.
Just like a rental real estate property, you borrow against
Yes.
it.
Yeah. Okay. So the brokerage account, and what happens a lot of times, Charlie, when we get to this one, people are like, all right, you just told me so many accounts. What do I do? Well, I think really it's all about knowing that the 401k cash balance pension, that is your money, but you share the future profits with the government because you're going to pay taxes on that money. So the Roth, that is your money, period. The brokerage account, that is your money. It's really all about just being like a paw where you're saving a certain percentage and building a certain amount of wealth. So you can use all of these accounts as accounts that will help you to become a millionaire. And so just making sure you're saving a good amount and you have some type of trajectory of how much you'll have in retirement. The 529s, again, same thing. The goal there is for education, but that's not listed as one of our main stays for multi-millionaire pilots. The next one, Charlie, is the left seat opportunity, the reset opportunity with the left seat. So do you want to talk a little bit about that dynamic? And again, maybe you're a little excited because you hear about what all the captains are talking about.
Yeah. I think we as human beings, not just airline pilots, we tend to spend the money way before it ever shows up. You know what I mean? In other words, as soon as I potentially get news of a bonus, it's immediately mentally spent. And so that's, I think, a slippery slope. And in other words, if I can know, and what we try to do is just say, hey, the next dollar that you come across through raise, bonus, whatever, here's the opportunity: a backdoor Roth, brokerage account, all the things we just talked about. You don't have to, of the dollar, you don't have to put 100% of it in those things, but just mentally prepare when that new dollar comes your way. Mentally, earmark that money for future savings and then spend the rest, whether it be 50%, 50 cents, on the dollar, whatever. But I think if we don't do that, Kevin, it is immediately spent. And that's just human nature. I mean, I could do it with the best of them as well. There's a lot of things in my mind right now that I could spend it on. So
Absolutely, Charlie. So Mark Covell and I went down this path, and there's a video on going to the left seat. But we came up with the idea of maybe save 33% of the new salary. If you could save 33%, you're going to be paying more in tax, et cetera, but spend the rest, enjoy the rest. But if you could just save 33% of it as a reset, that's fantastic. Before the life inflation comes in and income inflation comes in. So the last one, Charlie, that we think is really critical is the last 5 years. And we have here in our show notes T-5, T-4, T-3, T-2, T-1. Pilots are lucky in some ways that they know when their retirement has to be. So what are we talking about here about mapping out the last number of years? Why is that important? And I'll just say this: we want you to be a millionaire, multimillionaire when you retire, not just at age 60. But what are your thoughts, Charlie?
Yeah, if you look at most research, it'll say that you need 5 years to prepare psychologically for retirement. Not just financially. And so there's a lot of things to think about and kind of think through other than just the money part. Kevin, we learned this the hard way, not the hard way, but in 2020, when the separation packages were coming out for all the airlines, people had to make this, you got T5 years here counting down. It was like 6 weeks. And so it was a really compressed process for determining, are you ready for retirement? Man, it was really fascinating to go through that with pilots, because none of us will admit it, but it's true. There was a lot of fear involved in that decision because it's scary. It's a huge transition, and you just need to think about it, put some time into it. We're big on planning. Plan yourself or get somebody to plan with you. Just do it. Just do some kind of planning, I think is the thought there too.
Yeah, and I'll just pound the table here just on the fact that, when there's 5 years left, it's not the same as when there's 11 years left. And that's because you really do have a sequence of return risks there. So just make sure you have the appropriate risk going into retirement, starting 5 years before. Maybe starting 10 years before would be better, but absolutely 5 years before, Charlie.
Yeah. And that sequence of return risk, we've talked about that before on one of our podcasts. I can't remember the number. We'll put it in the show notes, but that's a real mathematical risk. And basically that is 2008, when our pilots had to retire at age 60. Kevin, they retired at age 60 into the worst recession we've had since the Great Depression. So those folks faced the sequence of return risk, and there's things to think about and plan for to mitigate that risk.
Absolutely, Charlie. So I'll just say a final comment on this whole idea of multimillionaire pilot next door is that we don't believe as a firm that, again, pilots have to be paupers. Their families have to be paupers. We've already said we like nice things. Human beings, we all like nice things, and that's just a part of the human condition. If you can set up your accounts on automatic pilot, that is the key. Now, what percentage of your pay do you have to save? Well, in the book, they say, in the original book, they said 10%. Charlie, I think you and I, we love 20% of, taxable income would be fantastic. Now, again, 20% of taxable income, that's a whole lot of money. That's $125,000 for someone that's making close to $500,000. But if you can save that amount of money, you don't have to feel guilty about the rest. You can enjoy the rest. And again, you're giving yourself a good probability to have a great future.
Yeah. And do the math. This is where the planning part comes in, is you kind of need to know how much you should be saving and whether you're on track or not. And there's ways to do that. So that's a good exercise for everyone to do. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks so much for listening to the Pilot Money Guys today. Hopefully brought value to you. And we our mission is just to help alleviate some confusion out there from things that you may be hearing and questions that you may have. So hopefully this was helpful. We'd love it if you commented in the review section of the podcast. Give us a rating and review and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Thank you, and fly safe.
Thank you for listening to the Pilot Money Guys podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen. We are grateful for your reviews because they encourage others to listen in. Visit leadingedgeplanning.com to learn more and subscribe to our newsletter. Leading Edge Financial Planning, LLC, LEFP, is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where LEFP and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. For additional information, please visit our website at www.leadingedgeplanning.com. The information provided is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, and it should not be relied on as such. It should not be considered a solicitation to buy or an offer to sell a security. It does not take into account any investor's particular investment objectives, strategies, tax status, or investment horizon. You should consult your attorney or tax advisor. The views expressed in this commentary are subject to change based on market and other conditions. These documents may contain certain statements that may be deemed forward-looking statements. Please note that any such statements are not guarantees of any future performance, and actual results or developments may differ materially from those projected. Any projections, market outlooks, or estimates are based upon certain assumptions and should not be construed as indicative of actual events that will occur. All information has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but its accuracy is not guaranteed. There is no representation or warranty as to the current accuracy, reliability, or completeness of, nor liability for, decisions based on such information, and it should not be relied on as such.